Okay, now we're going on to part two. If you haven't seen the first part of it, you need to go back and see that. That's all of 45 minutes. You've missed out on the whole thing, and this is a multi-parter here going deep into this. We just got through talking about in the Ugaritic text how Shakar and Shalim were perhaps at the beginning of all things, and there were supposedly these women, or perhaps goddesses, that were bobbing up and down on the shore and stuff, and it got him excited, but he didn't do anything here. He went ahead and killed a bird and cooked it up for them, and he said, by the time the bird's cooked up, figure out if you want to call me husband or if you want to call me a father figure, and I'll just act accordingly. Which is pretty nice, I guess, in a way that you'd say, but that was dawn and dusk, and a lot of these religions and concepts all go with this. In fact, the Bible idea that the first of things had to do with day and night. Well, actually, it doesn't come till after plants are on there and everything, and then let there be light, right? But so that's kind of out of kilter a little bit. But regardless, if you look at it, they have dawn and dusk concepts and names for them, and so on too. So, and they're all parts of pantheons of things that make things go. If you dawn brings the day, and that's fantastic, and of course is hooked up to Venus, which is shown then and then also shown again at dusk, makes an appearance. So there are a lot of people that say this is the twin goddess concept, and they're hooking up Venus, and that's where this actually goes. Strangely, our kids are known to be cleavers of the sea right off the bat, or children of the sea, and because they were women, they were bouncing around in the surf perhaps, and in the first part of this, a lot of people have made the connection that they were mermaid type people, and that's where that comes from. And there's been all kinds of crazy things said about this ideal, but these people were already masters of the sea, and these people, the Phoenicians, were masters of the sea before 10,000 BC by far. And people don't really give credit to that point at all. We try to act like because of finding American stuff that people just figured out how to go on a ship and they didn't know where they were going and the world was flat. That's not true at all. They found out the world was round a long time ago. I've done a lot of videos about it, but they still, when they knew the world was round, talked about the four corners of the earth. We have a map, and it's works that way too. Maps are atlases too, and hey, there's a god for that. But it talked about these two goddesses and so on, and this one of the womb, and these things happening and these breakdowns. But in the Ugaritic ball cycle that a lot of people have heard about, the introduced dwelling on or in Mount Lay or Lael, possibly meaning night, like lull you to sleep, is the place or the dwelling of El. It says that it's the fountains of the two rivers, at the spring of the two deeps, he dwells in a tent. According to some interpretation of the text, which may explain why he had no temple in Ugarit, as to the rivers and spring of the two deeps, these might refer to real streams or rivers, are the mythical sources of the saltwater ocean, and the freshwater sources under the earth are to the waters above the heavens and the waters beneath the earth. And I would pretty much just say, well, yes. Which one? Maybe kind of all of them in a way. Because he's a god of the sky and everything, and the idea is at nighttime the ocean hooks up to the Milky Way, because that's how that works. And if you look at death cycles and the way that the Egyptians and everybody involved in the Caucasian world pretty much, and even others, had this concept that whenever you die, you take this magical boat ride to heaven and up into the sky. So how far back does this boat ride go? Well, they had this concept, but he's also, by being dwelling on or in a mountain, this is also the great hall of the Mountain King that you hear about, and well, there's a Christmas song type thing, or one they play at Christmas a lot about it and everything. Da 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 da. It sounds, da da. But that's also in Dungeons and Dragons and things like that, and the whole concept of this idea that he's this god of the mountain idea. A lot of people have looked at that and said that it also, because of that and a few other connectives they've given, that's the reason that they put a hole through a stone and stood it up to make a shadow in the first place, working with timing and so on, that there had been a mountain or a spire before, and that mountain or spire before would cast at certain places and stuff, and knowing that knowledge, that's how they started recreating it. And that led up to places that there's a lot of them before Stonehenge, but Stonehenge that we know about famously, and they're not just hooked up to where the sun goes and the shadow actually works. That does work that way, and for equinoxes and everything, but it also hooks up to all kinds of when stars land and retrieve, but it just looks like this symmetrical wheel set on the ground. Yeah, it works that way. It's amazing how it works that way, and that little offset centerpiece that's in there sets the whole thing off. And a couple of those distant ones that are outside are alignment stones too. But so he talked about the heavens under the earth, real streams. Well, the headwaters of the Tigris and Euphrates. And that's pretty much where we're talking at. In fact, it's believed that some of these people that were ruling over this place, that were putting out these mythologies, had previously lived up a little northern of there, and just about the area they're talking about where those two rivers meet. And this idea that those rivers went off into the abyss, just like we hear in Enki's tales and so on, right? Enki will be mentioned here later. But also there's that belief where it goes and meets off into the sky. And so they are rivers, and they are mythical rivers. And of course they do hook up to the saltwater oceans and so on. And then of course there was that idea that there was water in space, and we were somehow trapped in a spit bubble, floating around like a snow globe, if you will. In the episode of the Palace of Baal, the god Baal-Hadad invites the 70 sons of Atharat to feast in his new palace. Presumably these sons have been fathered on Atharat by El. In following passages, they seem to be the gods Elohim in general, or at least a large portion of them. This is the Elohim. The only sons of El named individually in the Ugaritic text are Yam, which is the sea god, which is Neptune, Mot, the god of death, which is Pluto in ancient times, and Ashtar, which is Venus, who may be the chief and leader of most of the sons of El. Baal-Hadad is a few times called El's son rather than the son of Dagon as he's normally called, possibly because El is in the position of a clan father to the all the gods, or an all father, if you will, in the way that works. So this Elohim shows up again too. So the Elohim that works with this concept of an idea, and this is the triad they have there with Yam and Mot and Ashtar, and the major three planet situation too, if you look at it going on with this concept. But then there's the underworld concept too. So one is really the goddess of birth, and one of them is life, and the other one is death. And it's strange that it works off that the one that is life in that situation would have to be Yam, the sea, the giver of life. But in a place where people are living off of the sea and the times that it floods, and knowing that that water is just like the rain that makes everything happen, it works out that way pretty well. The fragmentary text describes a banquet to which El invites the other gods, and then disgraces himself and becomes roaring drunk and passing out after confronting an otherwise unknown Hubbe, or demon, he with the horns and tail. The text ends with an incantation for the cure of some disease or possibly a hangover. This is where a lot of the Satan ideas come from, right? The Hebrew form appears in Latin letters and standard Hebrew transcriptions as El, and in Tiberian Hebrew inscriptions as El is a genetic word for God that could be used for any god, including Hadad, Moloch, or Yahweh. In Tanakh, Elohim is the normal word for a god or the great god or gods, given that M suffix is a word plural to Hebrew, which shows you Elohim is plural, and they talk about a council of gods, and then it says, let us make them look in our image, and all of those things that people just can't get around whenever they try to keep dulling it out. But the form also, El also appears mostly in poetic passages and in the patriarchal narratives attributed to the priestly source. Where does that priestly source come from? From the Canaanites. Makes you wonder who those Levites were that were controlling the whole group of people. Maybe you can figure it out. So we talked about 70 suns here a minute ago, and I let it fly right by, but then again, that's showed up twice now already, and I think I'll show it up another one. That's a reason the Septuagint is 70 people going into it. Because there's like 70 decans before you go to the next zodiac and work your way all the way through. 72 years is about a man's lifetime period. Back then, if you could make it that long, it was something, but in the Tanakh, it's used as a normal time, though, a normal word, but the form El also appears mostly in poetic passages. It occurs 217 times in the Masoretic text, 73 times in Psalms, which the Psalms, they've said, of King David generally come from the Phoenicians, and it's recording Phoenician times. It was recorded in Psalms 55 times, and in the book of Job, and otherwise mostly in poetic passages or passages written in elevated prose. It occasionally appears with a definite article as Ha-El, which is the God. For example, the 2 Samuel passage here. And the theoretical position of the Tanakh is that the names El and Elohim, when used in the singular to mean the supreme God, refer to Yahweh, beside whom other gods are supposed to be either non-existent or totally insignificant. So it doesn't work that way correctly, because also in the Bible there are places where it says there are 70 different clans of people all going on here, but Yahweh goes to the people in Israel, and that's what he does. So Yahweh's thing is these people, not all these others around that. A lot of people used to make a big deal out of that. But in a modern day, everybody tries to be in the, oh, he meant everybody, even the Eskimos and stuff. No, he doesn't talk about any of those people. Nothing other than real Caucasians. In fact, it's kind of odd, but Noah would have landed in the Caucasus Mountains at Ararat. And in fact, those Tigris and Euphrates rivers run right up above that. Whether it was a long-standing belief or relatively new one has long been subject to inconclusive scholarly debate. About the prehistory of the source of the Tanakh and about the prehistory of Israelite religion in the P strand, priestly, Exodus 6:3 may be translated as, I revealed myself to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as El Shaddai, but I was not known them by my name Yahweh or Jehovah, or whichever way you want to put that, which is not even really a name. People get I am what I am out of that, and it's just like, what? What's your name? Puddentane? Ask me again, I'll tell you the same. It's about that. Oh, I am what I am, the great I am. Okay, whatever. However, it said Genesis that Abraham accepted the blessings of El when Melchizedek, so the blessings of El, when Melchizedek, the king of Salem, a high priest of its deity El Elyon, blessed him. Now, Eli Elyon is supposed to be the God Most High, right? What does that mean? It means there's a lot of gods, and this one is the Most High out of the group. It's just really busted. But you see, they've already got astrology all built into it, and the farthest away visible planet that they can see, Saturn, Chronos, El. And so he's the Most High, or farthest away on the big bubble, making it all happen. And these layered effects, they used to draw art that looked that way, but so Melchizedek, though, is a priest of Saturn, basically, and he's definitely a Canaanite priest. So one scholarly position is the identification of Yahweh with El is late, that Yahweh was earlier thought of as only one of many gods and not normally identified with El. Another is that much of the Hebrew Bible, the name El is an alternative name for Yahweh. Like, oh yeah, it's the same guy. Well, Elijah means El is Yahweh. But in the Elohist and priestly traditions, it's considered an earlier name than Yahweh. El goes back, way back, to the very first writing of anything, and we don't have any of this Yahweh situation coming till much later and everything. People have realized that a long time ago, even they try to give this big thing that happened. So when, where, and all that, and it really comes down to the book being actually a conglomeration of everybody and put under one. But Mark Smith has argued that Yahweh and El were originally separate but were considered synonymous from the very early on, that the name Yahweh is used in the Bible. Tanakh is the first book of Genesis, and Genesis says at that time people began to call upon the name of the Lord. In some places, especially in Psalms 29, Yahweh is clearly envisioned as a storm god, something not true of El so far as we know, although true of his son Baal-Hadad, the storm god. El, yeah, he's got storm. You want to hear another El thing? It goes with Baal, or Ba-El, the son of El. That's what that comes out to. Well, he knows how to do electricity when he throws that lightning bolt, doesn't he? There's a lot of people that know that electricity is named through Latin because of this knowledge that had, because it all worked with these people and lightning bolts and the power that goes with that. The elite knew it. The elders knew it. It's as big as an elephant, or the Tower of Bib-El, that predominantly this is about El and the Canaanite religion, but it started in Sumeria. And it's got some Egyptian stuff, and it clearly denotes that in the first part of it, of course, with them supposedly living there in the first place. In some places, especially Psalms 29, Yahweh is clearly envisioned as a storm god, something not really seen there, but it is with Baal-Hadad. Yahweh, who was prophesied to one day do battle with Leviathan, or Yom the sea god, the serpent, and slay the dragon in the sea. You don't think it's there? It's in Isaiah, it's 27:1. The slaying of this serpent in myth is a deed attributed to both Baal-Hadad and Anat in the Ugaritic text, but not really to El. Well, as I'm showing you here, that they're balled up the whole Canaanite religion and said, well, it's all one, and then everything else is taken care of by angels, and then nowadays we have all the saints, and if you added it all up, I bet that comes to 70. What do you think? But there's that Anat of Anatolia. Yeah. But she's cognitive Venus type. So here we have Inanna and the situation working on it, all kinds of mythologies. Such mythological motifs are variously seen as late survivals from a period when Yahweh held a place in theology compared to that of Hadad and Ugarit, or as late henotheistic, monotheistic applications to Yahweh of deeds more commonly attributed to Hadad, or simply as example of eclectic application of the same motifs and imagery to various different gods, or just turning around and scribbling out the name and putting another name in there in the way of it and saying that regardless of that, oh, and when we say El, it doesn't mean the El of the people that we took the land from and everything about it. It really just meant the generic God. And then oh yeah, in the old part of it, everybody's names got it on and everything, and a whoopsie, that just means that they really liked God a lot. What God? Oh, he's got a secret word. Similarly, it's argued inconclusively whether El Shaddai or El Elam or El Elyon and so forth were originally understood as separate divinities. Albrecht presented his theories on the original differences of such gods in Der Vater and or Vater in 1929. Vater is where we get Vader from, as far as Darth Vader. Got is a word meaning God, the God of Vader, but refer to the same single great God, El. This is the position of Frank Moore Cross. What is certain is that the form El does not appear in Israelite names from every period, including the name Yisrael, or it does appear in every single one of the forms they've talked about, including the name Yisrael, and Israel meaning El strives. But there's also connections to Israel meaning Saturn, because the ancient Phoenician name for that star that wanders through the sky, that's actually the Most High, was Israel, because it strives and lives on, and it's El Olam, it's El Ayon, it's El that strives. That's the way that really works. According to the Oxford Companion World Mythology, it seems almost certain that the God of the Jews evolved gradually from the Canaanite El, who was in all likelihood the God of Abraham because of Melchizedek and, of course, those connections, and what he would have been running into over here. If El was the high God of Abraham, Elohim, the prototype of Yahweh, Asherah was his wife, and there are archaeological indications that she was perceived as such before she was in fact divorced in the context of emerging Judaism of the 7th century BC. You can find that in Kings, but yeah, quite often, well, a lot of times people have made that same connection, but now that they've found pottery, and 3 or 4 different times now it talks about Yahweh and his Asherah, and then they find that it was the pole that was in the day. What? And they've shown it into there. In fact, they wanted to knock down the Asherah poles, and what was that? Oh, they wanted to knock down the tent. No, you're trying to hide something. What was the Asherah pole for? That was the Queen of Heaven, but you stole her from the Canaanite religion. So if you just switch her name in the place of that, then boom, 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 it's not going to work so well if people ever find this out someday. But I thought they got away with it, but people, we were supposed to figure this out 2,000 years ago and connect it to where it fell next, into Rome's hands. And this was to help deify Titus, who's got his own book in the Bible, but that's for other videos. Well, hell, I've already done a couple on that. A Psalm of David. The apparent plural form of Elim or Elohim gods occurs only 4 times in the Tanakh. Psalm 29, understood as enthronement psalm, begins, ascribe to Yahweh, sons of gods. Ascribe to Yahweh glory and strength. Psalm 89 in Hebrew has, for who in the skies compares to Yahweh? Who can be like unto Yahweh among the sons of gods? Well, you can say that he's the Most High and there's all these other gods, but that's in your pantheon. And all these other people have pantheons too, but of course, in the way we look at it now, everything is all pagan, right? But then these are real, really? Well, where do those come from? Well, really? Well, then, aren't you shooting yourself in the foot with the thing, the idea? No, it's... And I've even heard people say it's what they really meant, and they just figured it out. You can see how they didn't know how to pray correctly, and they didn't know how to this, and man, they went out of their way. They went crazy while they were starving to death, trying to figure out a way to please the gods so it would just rain and things. Don't turn it into something that it wasn't. So, traditionally, B'nai Elohim has been interpreted as the sons of the mighty. But mighty ones, well, that's plural. For El can mean mighty, though such use may be metaphorical compared to the English expression, by God, awful. It is possible that the expression Elim in both places descends from an archaic stock phrase in which Elim, or Elohim, was a singular form with the M eclectic and therefore be translated as sons of El. The M eclectic appears elsewhere in the Tanakh and other Semitic languages. Its meaning is unknown, possibly simply emphasis. No. It appears in similar context in Ugaritic text where the expression Bib-El alternates with Bib-Elim. Both must mean sons of El. That phrase with M eclectic also appears in Phoenician scripts as late as the 5th century BC. So it's going on there. And if you look into it, the Elim is generally talking about the group. The gods as a group. Whereas whenever they talk about ill, sometimes it does hook up to a group of gods that they're talking about, but not everybody, not inclusive, not the 70, not, that situation sometimes too. So who is like you among the gods, Yahweh? Well, I read that wrong, didn't I? Well, no, I didn't. Right here, this line, who is like you among the gods, Yahweh? In reality, this is showing you that there are a lot of gods, but he's supposed to be the Most High. Oddly, we find Yah was connected in Egypt to a moon god. But that isn't exactly the truth of all of it. Another final occurrence here is in the Song of Moses, or in Daniel 11:36. And the king will do according to his pleasure, and he will exalt himself and magnify himself over every god. So there's a lot of them, huh? And against the God of gods, El Elim, and he will speak outrageous things and will prosper until the indignation is accomplished, for that which is decided will be done. Well, if you read that through and you're thinking different thoughts, it sure sounds weird. I'm going to do it one more time here. And the king will do accordingly to his pleasure, and he will exalt himself and magnify himself over every god. So there's lots of them. And against the God of gods, he will speak outrageous things and will prosper until until the indignation is accomplished. For that which is decided will be done. Sounds like he's going to blaspheme or something and outrageous things, and he's going to prosper. So, yeah, I could say a whole bunch about that. Let's just go on. There are a few cases in the Tanakh where some think El referring to a great god. El is not equated with Yahweh. One is in Ezekiel in the taunt against man who claims to be divine. In this instance, the leaders of Tyre. Son of man, say to the prince of Tyre, thus say the Lord Yahweh, because your heart is proud and you have said, I am El, God in the seat of the Elohim gods, I am enthroned in the middle of the seas. Yet you are a man and not El, even though you have made your heart like the heart of Elohim or the gods. This is where they're just finding a reason so they can kill off these people. They're like, oh, you blaspheme, and pow. But in reality, all this was going on, and you could say the Pope's trying to speak for God and all these different things, and the Son of Man. It's just all done in difference around nowadays versus then versus something. Just a bullshit way of taking over something like that. Here, El might refer to a generic god or to the highest god, El, whenever viewed as applying to the king of Tyre. Specifically, the king was probably not thinking of Yahweh. When he viewed as a general taunt against everyone making divine claims, it may not refer to Yahweh depending on the context. So they're saying here, you have said I am God. Is he said he was Yahweh? No. They're telling you again. They understand, and God himself who said this. Right? So God's even saying there are other gods. But you wanted to elevate yourself above the God of gods and all of that type stuff, and boom, 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 you wanted to be over everybody, and so, schmack, I'm going to steal your shit. In Judges 9:46, we find that El Barit, God of the covenant, seems the same as Baal Barit, Lord of the covenant, whose worship has been condemned in a few verses earlier. See Baal for a discussion on this passage. Psalms 82 says, Elohim, God, gods, stands in the council of El. He judges among the gods. What? Well, so there's a council, and he judges among the, plural. That's not going to work too really good either, is it? So you find that El is just tried to say, oh, that's just God, and then Baal is just Lord. And so where they have it in the Bible where it says Lord or God, they've just replaced it a little bit, or in a lot of places not even replaced it at all, just told you it doesn't mean the same thing as you really would find out that it would one day. This could mean when Yahweh judges along with many other gods is one of the council of the high god El. However, it can also mean that Yahweh stands in the divine council, generally known as the Council of El, is El judging among the other members of the council. The following verses in which God condemns those whom he says were previously named gods, Elohim, and the sons of the Most High, suggest that God here is in fact El, judging the lesser gods. An archaic phrase appears in Isaiah 14:13, Kokabe El, the stars of God, referring to the circumpolar stars that never set, possibly especially to the 7 stars of Ursa Major. This has to do also with the swastika people. The phrase also occurs in the Frigi inscription, Hakam, I proceeded by the definite article H and followed by the M, eclectic. 2 other apparent fossilizing expressions are RZL, cedars of God, generally translated something like the mighty cedars, godly cedars. In Psalms 80:10 and Hebrew verse 10, Kari El, mountains of God, generally translated something like great mountains or mighty mountains in Psalms 36:7 in Hebrew verse. So again, we have a bunch of what I call apologetics for it, but you know, the cedars were all known for being up there, and it wasn't a product of what you think of as the Hebrews. It wasn't the Hebrews that everybody was buying all those sacred cedars from in the cedar forests up there in Lebanon and all of that we hear about in Gilgamesh Tales or anything. It was these Phoenician people here. They had the boats, were made out of it, and they were coming back and forth like crazy, masters of the sea, zoom zoom, children of the sea. For the reference in some texts of Deuteronomy 32:8 to 70 sons of God corresponding to the 70 sons of El in the Ugaritic text, see El Elyon. Well, we could go to that, but man, it's just going to get longer and longer if I do. But in reality, that's also the reason the Septuagint's got its number and the thing that goes along with that, and it's also reasons supposedly that the zodiac is broken down the way that it is, but to make it really correct, they had to add 2 to that, see, because it's 72, which is numerator of 12. And so that's a thing that the Sumerians had hooked up with them from way back when, and anybody that took this on from that really had this going on. And we're fixing to get into Sanchuniathon. And he's a priest from the area of Byblos. So it said that he's a Greek writer, but he was somebody that was of there. In fact, his name actually signifies that he's a priest of Saturn of the area of Byblos, which got turned over. Kind of like later when we think of Josephus, how what worked out with him, that's what kind of went on here a little bit in a way, if you think of it. Philo of Byblos was a Greek writer whose account Sanchuniathon survives in quotation by Eusebius, so it runs through a few people here, and it may contain the major surviving traces of Phoenician mythology, although Eusebius tries to discredit a few things here, and it's because it kind of showed too much. A lot of people have pointed that out. El was rendered as Elis, or called by his standard Greek counterpart, Chronus. Is not the creator god or first god. El is rather the son of sky, which is Uranus, which is On, and earth, Ga, or Gaia, or Ki, Ki. Sky and earth are themselves children of Elyon, the Most High. El is brother to the god Bib-El. Beth-El just means house of God. Beth-El, Beth means house. To Dagon, and an unknown god equated with Greek Atlas, and to the goddesses Aphrodite and Astarte and Rhea, presumably Asherah. And Dion, equated with Belat Gebal. El is the father of Persephone and of Athena, presumably the goddess Anat. Well, here we have another connection towards there's Athena and Anat, and that kind of goes with the name a little bit, but also goes with Athena was Neith of the Egyptians, who said that it was the same type goddess that did it, and it was Neith, which it's kind of weird and just backwards, but Athena without the A backwards becomes Neith. Sky and earth have separated from one another in hostility, but Sky insists on continuing to force himself on earth and attempts to destroy the children born of such unions, and Atlas holds the sky up. At last, with the advice of his daughter Athena, the god Hermes Trismegistus, perhaps Thoth, El successfully attacks his father Sky with a sickle and spear of iron, and he and his military allies, the Elohim, gain Sky's kingdom. And doesn't it sound kind of familiar? In a later passage, it's explained that El castrated the Sky, On, which is told also in the tale of On and in the Greek tale, but it's also the thing that happened to Noah after the ark, and the reason for that. Yeah, whenever Noah gets all drunk and curses the guys out and everything, it's trying to equate certain people. One of the Sky's concubine, who was given to El's brother Dagon, was already pregnant by Sky. It's going to be Zeus, who was born of the union, called Demarius or Zeus, but once called Adotus, which is obviously Hadad. Go through that last part again. He was called Demarius or Zeus. Zeus is the sky god with electricity bolts. Once called Adotus is obviously Hadad. Baal Hadad is again the sky god with the lightning bolts. Is the same thing. But what is Demarius? Well, D on the start of a lot of words means Dio, really. And Dio Marius means god of the sea. So that's kind of strange how you have Demarius. Maris is sea, with Mary meaning oceans or water or sea. So we have that connection again there. The Baal of the Uritic text, who now becomes an ally of his grandfather Sky and begins to make war on El. So now we have that connection with Zeus and his tales. El has 3 wives. His sisters are half-sisters Aphrodite, Ashtarta, Rhea, presumably Asherah, the Queen of Heaven, and Dione, identified by Sanchuniathon with Bib-El, the tutelary goddess of Byblos. Tutelary doesn't mean the major god, but it's basically their hub of that place. Like we talked about before, of gods having certain cities. A city which Sanchuniathon says that El founded. Byblos. El is depicted primarily as a warrior in Ugaritic sources. Baal has the warrior role, and El is peaceful. And it may be that Sanchuniathon depicts an earlier tradition that was more preserved in the southern regions of Canaan, or it may have preserved on the fact that he used to be a warrior and now he's passed on, and now it's passed to that electric sky god, just like everybody else's religion has done. Wonder if it looked strange to anybody back in this time that everybody had the same thing going on. And then if you look at what it happened from, everybody had something similar to that happened too. It's crazy, isn't it? El is depicted as a warrior, they say, though, but Eusebius, through whom the Sanchuniathon is preserved, is not interested in setting up the word forth completely or in order. But we are told that El slew his own son Sadidus, a name that some commentators think may be a corruption of Shaddai, because S can be Shemitic, SH, Shadidus, one of the epithets of the biblical El Shaddai. And that El also beheaded one of his daughters, later perhaps referring to the same death of Sadidus, we are told. But on the occurrence of the pestilence and mortality, Chronus offers his only begotten son as a whole burnt offering to the Sky Father and circumcises himself, compelling his allies to do the same. This is a kind of important part, so I'm going to go ahead and switch to the next part that's here. This is some of the only recordings of this concept, but it ends up being important for the area and things that are known or said by others that aren't quite mentioned in here that you can add to it, if you know folklore, and a few other Gnostic tellings. Be in your top left hand corner coming up, and click on it. Before you go, write something downstairs, click like on this, and hey, if you're not subscribed, subscribe. But even if you are, click on the bell and then make sure it's signifying every time, because if you put